On this episode of AV Week, we take a look at the top AV companies in the world, getting AV talent and keeping it, and the place of drones in the audiovisual space. All that and more. Next on AV Week.
The network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AVNation.
This is AVNation.
This is AV Week, episode 432, recorded Wednesday, November 27th, 2019. Core Growth.
Support for AVNation is brought to you by Daylight, the leading producer of high-quality projection screens worldwide, and by Biam, and by FSR.
This is AV Week, your weekly wrap-up of audiovisual news and information. My name is Tim Albright. I am your host. With us to discuss the news and information we have gathered this week, first and foremost, I have not had him on in a very long time, my buddy, Mr. Adrian Boyd from Arab. Welcome, sir.
Good morning.
Also, Mr. Hanan AVWeek from Prime View, who is no longer in New York, but south, somewhere in the Florida area. How are you, sir?
Thank God.
Also, Mr. Bill Chamberlain from Barracks. Welcome, sir.
Good morning, Tim. Thanks for having me.
And last but not least, certainly, Mr. Brock McGinnis, who last time we talked was exiting Westbury. And so I'm going to let Brock say who he is with now.
You know what, Tim, I've become a cliche. As guys exit a career, they set up a consulting business until they find out what they're going to do next. My consulting business is called Avitas, and it's consulting and advisory services for both our industry and our clients.
Forgetting, just for the record, you could never be a cliche. Everyone else would be a cliche after you. So
thank you for that.
Benefit of being Brock McGinnis. All right, first story here comes to us from our friends over at SCN. SCN has posted their top 50 integrators. They cover, SCN typically primarily covers the North American market, but not every integrator on this list is from the Western Hemisphere, which I found interesting. Several ties in that list actually puts the number of integrators on that list at 55. As Megan Dutta from Future and SCN notes, these submissions are quote-unquote voluntary and are dependent on companies being willing to submit their financials by the deadline. So understand that this is not the 50 top integrators in the world. This is not 50 top integrators, period, in North America. These are the 55 top integrators who submitted their financials. So let's understand that going. We'll talk about some benefits of why you would do that and why you wouldn't. At the top, once again, is AVI-SPL, the Tampa-based firm, grew to $905 million, so they still have not quite hit that $1 billion, though listening to their CEO the last couple of years, that is definitely a mark they're aiming for. There is a fight for the top spot between Diversified and AVI-SPL. The gap is actually most pronounced between the second place, Diversified, at $875 million, and third place, Whitlock, at $360 million. Bill Chamberlain is here from Barracks, who came in at number 24 on the list. So we'll actually start with Bill. Bill, you and your team, you guys put together your submission and you send it off to SCN. What are the benefits? What benefits come from a list like this and making a list like this?
Yeah, thanks, Tim. You know, it's interesting because there are differing opinions about whether or not it's beneficial for a company to provide it. It provides insight into what you're doing from a revenue standpoint. A lot of companies don't like to share that info. There's quite a few really good audiovisual companies that don't submit, so you won't see them on that list. We find it as a value because it kind of provides a snapshot of the industry and the growth that we're seeing. You know, there's a lot of M&A activity going on within our market, you know, that's relevant within that list. And you see the expansion both on not only on the geographical side, but also on the products and services sets that people are offering. I find it's really interesting if you look at the traditional AV companies that are only providing traditional AV services versus a lot of companies that are providing other technologies and services on the UC space, structured cabling, things along those lines. We also find it's very beneficial from a marketing standpoint. You know, it's something that we point to with clients. It's something that helps show the value that Barracks does and our positioning within the market as well.
All right, Mr. McGinnis, Bill mentioned the fact that there are some folks that are on that list because they chose not to. So what are some of the drawbacks of making a list or putting yourself out there and your financials?
Um, it was always a real debate within our shop about whether we kind of open the kimono and let people know how much business we do, or you stay a bit of a mystery. And some people will think you're smaller than you are, and some people will think you're larger than you are. And the biggest drawback of the list to me is that I don't believe all the numbers.
Okay.
So it's I've been, I'm quite familiar with some of the businesses on that list, and I look at the numbers, and I look at employee revenue ratio, and it's inconceivable to me how people can do so much business with so few employees in some cases. Are they in fact providing integration services, or are they shipping boxes? And there are a bunch of different business models. So it's always allowed, kind of created some head scratching. We always chose not to participate. I think that our industry will be in huge problems if the 50th largest integrator is actually only a $9 million company.
Okay, I understand. Real quickly, do you think that there are funny numbers, let's say, on the higher end, or do you think it's more on the lower end, or is it just in general?
It's a generic. I'm not calling anybody out in particular. So,
all right.
But it definitely becomes an ego play for some of the people.
This is a circle of trust. You can share your real thoughts if you want.
No.
Yes.
I'm
nobody.
Well, I'm recording.
And nobody, Hanan, will ever find out.
Yes. Hanan actually brings it in. Do you look at a list like this when let's say that you get a new application from somebody, a new dealer application, and they say, we made the SEN top 50 because this. Does that help you, or does that impact your decision, or is it you guys are just looking for the perfect or the fit that kind of the partnership that fits for your company?
I think it really depends on the application as well as the project. For example, when we launched one of our new products back in November 2018, Fusion Max, we were very careful on what today what other people call a bundle solution. We were very careful of who we partner with. But the reality is, and Adrian knows this as well from her personal experience, there's some integrators out there who may claim to have a boatload of experience doing video walls, for example, but in doing specific types of technologies, maybe not. And whereby, for example, firms that are maybe not the top 10, okay? And by the way, we should sometimes calculate how much profit margin they make, by the way, in those top 10. That should be a separate list.
You're probably not going to get that.
I'm just throwing that out there. I mean, look, again, you have private equity to answer to. It's not always so simple. Growth. But, again, I'm a little biased, obviously, PrimeView being a privately held company, right? We actually have to make money. So it's a little different mentality. But the reality is when we launch that type of product, we have to be very meticulous in who we work with, because in some cases we could get burnt, as even a manufacturer. So for example, when we launched the product, we have certain guys that nailed it out of the gate, And those are top 10 and top 20 companies. And then there's certain guys that are in the top 40, 50 that were not able to nail it. But we just did a project this week, for example, with Varex, that we really wanted our guys on site, and for whatever reason, logistically, it couldn't work out, and the team nailed it without us. Like, that's a damn good feeling, honestly.
Yeah.
And that scares me, because there's other guys who think that, like, we're bigger than Varex, we can do it. No, not necessarily. It has to do with skill set, not just how big you are as a sales giant. So the list is helpful for certain instances, but what I find, and this is my biggest challenge by far in the top 5, top 10, is because of the sheer size of these companies, they have a deep bench, but that deep bench doesn't necessarily always mean grade A. So there's the A team, the B team, and you could honestly get down to the Z team, depending on how busy they are, depending on how many subcontractors they're using. Versus there's some guys out there that are not listed in the top 50, to Brock's point, that are privately held, that are rock stars, and they're not on any list, and they're awesome at what they do for maybe that specific vertical. So it's really vertical centric, what product you're using. And that list is great if I want to make a recommendation to a customer, to an end user saying, I've worked with these guys, and by the way, they're $400 million or $50 million or $20 million company. But other than that, pretty useless for me.
Well, but that also goes back to Bill's point about being useful for marketing and promotion and stuff like that. Yeah, absolutely. Adrian, we'll wrap up here with this. What does it say about our industry, the fact that there's a ginormous disparity between number 2 and number 3, and then another jump between number 3 and number 4, right? So to recap, Diversified sitting at 875 million. Whitlock, number 3, is 360. Number 4 is even further down the list. A little bit back to Brock's comment about number 50 being only $9 million. What does that say about the state of our industry?
Well, you also have to look at what happened this year in terms of mergers and acquisitions with a lot of these companies. So is that number that they have, is that part of that merger and acquisition, right? Do they have that market capitalization because, hey, we just bought somebody and they did a whole lot of business and we're adding that into our number? So it doesn't really show true metrics. The other thing is the numbers. When we look at it overall, are they really accurate? Because it's voluntary, there is a propensity possibly to fudge numbers. No one can say that's happening, but it's voluntary and you take it with a grain of salt. When we look at it as as a consulting group, it kind of says, okay, we gauge this. We can look at this going, okay, these are the top reporting integrators in a market. Do they have? Does our experience with them in the past warrant what they say that they actually can do? Some integrators, we've had excellent projects with them. They hit, they hit all the marks, and other times they don't. So a lot of it, when it comes to our disciplines and our teams all over the world, we just kind of have to, we're looking at it as a larger, what's the best for our client. And this list is good, sort of as an industry peg, but you kind of have to take it with a grain of salt. What I found very interesting when you kind of read through the article was just all of the comments from the executive leadership in a lot of these firms. And the biggest takeaway I have that we see is just employee retention and the skills gap we have in the industry. And you kind of notice that more and more as recruiters have become far more aggressive in the last, I would probably say the last 2.5 years. They become extremely aggressive in trying to find top talent for a lot of these organizations that now go, we have a huge skills gap. We've done we have to go to the next level, but we can't get to that point because we either don't have the capitalization to make that happen or the project workload. So it's very different. So when you see AVSPL at such, 905, right? In terms of reporting, $105 million, and you start looking down the gap, how are they maintaining their talent, and how are they, and how is that talent being adequately, compensated to keep that revenue going? Because as Hanan said, you have the A teams, but then you start running down to lesser and lesser skill sets, which does impact a company's bottom line if they have a bad project.
Absolutely does. It actually goes back to a cover story that our friends over at AV Magazine did. I want to say this, the October, November, December issue called Breaking Point. And they looked at the skill set and this disparity in the skill set in the industry. And during it, they interviewed several folks, some staffing and agencies as well over in the UK. But I would kind of transplant that over here. Adrian makes a very good point. The fact that there are some high talent, very highly talented folks that are going to get not necessarily poached, but certainly approached. Right? All of us on this call have gotten the unsolicited LinkedIn message saying, "Hey, are you looking?" Brock, you might want to go back through some of those. But all of us have gotten that, right? I've gotten that, and I run AVNation, right? So it's an ongoing issue, but it goes back to Adrian's point: is how do you keep your employees happy? Yes, everybody has a price. Goes back to the old wrestling days of the $1 Million Man. Everybody has a price, right? The question is, what is that price? But some of that is also, standard of living, right? And your comfort level and work-life balance and everything else that kind of works into that.
And not just for people, Tim, this is for companies. Growth in terms of top line sales dollars does not have to be the ultimate objective. Companies can be right-sized. They right-sized to serve a market, right-sized for the capability of the management, right-sized for the amount of working capital that's available. You want to open up 5 new offices. Well, you're going to sell your soul to somebody else's money.
Yeah.
That's going to happen. And then is it all about AV?
But Brock.
Yep.
Yeah, but Brock, to your point though, and I've seen this in our own company as we now started hiring, going through a big hiring right now, coming towards the end of the year, preparing for a huge pipeline that we're expecting in 2020, 21. We had to expand because we have customers that are taking us to Egypt. We have customers taking to Africa. So, I think if you grow too slowly sometimes,
yes,
right, then you can't necessarily sustain growth, let alone keep up with it. So I think to a certain point you have to, and again, that's coming from a manufacturer standpoint. Obviously, it's a little different on an integrator side, and then obviously it's even more different on a consultant side. But if you see growth coming in your pipeline, putting looming recession aside for a second, I'm not going to get into the economics here, but you do have to prepare for that growth, and otherwise you will be skinny when it comes to resources.
Yeah, you have to make sure that you hire for growth. And we did hear that AVNation, the first of this month, we added another person to our team, Lenora Lane. She is our new editor for the site, right? Lenora takes care of all the written stuff. Takes me out of it. Again, goes back to what you're good at, right? Focus on what you're good at. And I'm not good at that. And Lenora is. So,
and really, it's more of an understanding of what organic growth is for your business, right? We have a lot of integrators that naturally grow as the market dictates. So they add new offices because they see an opportunity. They have clients that say, hey, we need support and assistance, especially when you look at enterprise clients. And then you look at other, especially when we talk about this acquisition or merger mindset that we have been in the last couple of years, where integrators are growing their company, right, by purchasing a lot of these mom and pop organizations where the leadership wants to retire, but they don't want to leave their employees in a lurch. So what do? They are more or less start to shop their business to hopefully a firm that can keep, their core values the same and provide, something to their employees and the market as a whole. We've seen this quite often, and even through the advertising of this article, when you get into the PDF, there's a capital, I forget the name of the company, but they say, hey, we advised all of these other companies on their merger and acquisition, right? So it's when we look at dynamic growth and organic growth, it's something to kind of be mindful overall with our industry.
I think it's important as well in the fact that, you really need to focus your growth on your core clients. For us on the integration side, our core clients are those enterprise clients. And as their audiovisual teams and their audiovisual investment in technology grows, you got to be able to grow to support them as well.
Thank you so much for watching the first segment of this week's AV Week. If you want to see the entire episode, where we also talk about drones and the place of drones in the AV industry, click on the link below, or just go by the website, avnation.tv. That's avnation.tv.